All right, people. Well, where to begin? I didn't want to do this reaction video. I mean, I don't really. The term reaction video is sort of silly because it's sort of like I guess it's a YouTube genre. But I didn't want to do a video about the election results last night. Last night because it takes a while for all the data to come in. What I will say though is that the establishment coalescence around Joe Biden in the past 72 hours is without precedent in the history of American politics, or at least the modern history, because it was so rapid and it had such a determinative impact on public opinion and voter sentiment that I just don't think that there's any analogy you can draw really that makes sense. So I'm still taking a little bit of time to process this. You need to sort of sit with the data for a while, make sure you have all the information. But in essence, what happened was that turnout did exponentially increase. And this was predictable because in 2018, for the midterm elections, turnout was the highest for any midterm election since 1914. So obviously, there's a lot of dynamism in the electorate. Obviously, there are people who have been politicized and even, you might say, radicalized by the experience of the Trump era. But those people who have been politicized and radicalized and motivated to vote are not ideological socialists. They're not even necessarily Bernie sympathizers, because you don't have to be a socialist to be a sympathizer with Bernie. What they are just regular Dems, normie Dems is the quote that I would use, who have been fed this constant barrage of Trump hysteria, who have been told by the media and by certain progressive online media as well that Trump has turned the United States into an authoritarian hellscape, that the country has been taken over by fascists, that Nazis and Russia have inundated America. And so, what is the response of the median Democratic voter going to be to this? Well, not surprisingly, is that they want to remove the president who has allegedly enabled all this vast harm. Now, does Trump have serious problems? Yes. I talk about them quite a bit. But so many of the problems that have been emphasized and shouted about endlessly since he ran in 2016 and over the course of his tenure in office have been fake fantasy problems. Whether it's Russia, whether it's the authoritarianism alarmism, whether it's the kind of daily, day-to-day Twitter controversies, all that kind of stuff has congealed to create an impression in the electorate that Trump is something that he's not. And that's a problem because Trump actually does need a rational critique, but rational critique has not been on offer for the most part. So, what this alarmism really did, I think, is it fostered a certain conservative tendency in the electorate. If you go back and look at some of the commentary I did last spring and summer, I can give you the examples if you'd like. I said that what you need to do is take a look at what Joe Biden is predicating his campaign on. It's not really about policy. It's about restoration. It's about bringing back a normalcy. And if you go and read or watch his campaign announcement speech, He was talking about the Charlottesville incident from 2017. So he was actually mirroring the most extreme rhetoric that's used against Trump in the corporate media and by some so-called leftists and progressives. Because Joe Biden knew that the function of amplifying that rhetoric wasn't going to actually be to generate some kind of vast left-wing insurgency. It was going to be to frighten an already jittery Democratic electorate that was desperate to beat Trump and wanted whatever the safe alternative was to beating Trump. Now, I don't even think that Joe Biden is a safe alternative, but that's what people think. Because Joe Biden, as I've said time and time again, is undergoing obvious cognitive decline. They're not gaffes. His verbal so-called miscues or misstatements are not just run-of-the-mill gaffes that everybody makes now and then, where you say the wrong word or you fumble a sentence. Everybody does that. But everybody doesn't exhibit signs that their cognition is deteriorating in the way that Joe Biden is. Go watch Joe Biden's old speeches and old debate performances from decades ago, even in 2012, when he was debating Paul Ryan. Joe Biden did really well in that debate. He actually gave Obama a boost because Obama was regarded as not having done well in his first debate with Romney that year. But Biden actually did very well. He was cogent. He had his talking points in order. He engaged extemporaneously with Paul Ryan in a way that was actually persuasive and convincing and relatable. But that's not the current Joe Biden. That was 8 years ago. He's 77 years old. And he had brain aneurysms in the past. So it's not surprising that a man of his age, with the issues he's had, would experience these symptoms. But it's not a comfortable subject. I don't even particularly like talking about it. I think there are other aspects of Biden's record, his persona, his candidacy that are more worth emphasizing on the substance. But if you don't think that this is going to be a gigantic issue, then you're delusional. I mean, how can you watch his performance now and not think that he is showing signs of age-related decline? It's just amazing to me. But you know what? Most people don't sit around watching these debates. They don't think about politics all the time. They're not on Twitter. So what you have to constantly be cognizant of is that the world that I inhabit, and maybe you inhabit, but definitely I inhabit, where every day I'm following this stuff, the ins and outs, the spending amounts, the latest policy proposal, the attacks between the candidates, the very minute details of a presidential campaign. Most people have no awareness of this. And by the way, a little bit of a tangent, but I always felt that people were wrong to extrapolate excessively from the Nevada results. Yeah, Bernie did well among Latinos, but it was a caucus state in a rather idiosyncratic region of the country. So if you look at Latino vote, for example, in North Carolina yesterday, yeah, it was Bernie's best racial demographic, but Biden won it by, I think, 17 points over Bernie. So you can't take a small caucus state in Nevada, where organizational prowess is privilege, as with any caucus state, and just proclaim that that means it's going to be transferable to the rest of the country. You know, there are 330 million people here, right? And people don't live the same lives in different parts of the country. So have a little humility in how you interpret these data, I would say. But, you know, the one thing that is just unmistakable is that Bernie has not expanded his coalition. Has he made inroads with certain demographics? Yes, but in totality, it's not really been expanded relative to 2016. he's getting wiped out among black voters across the South. So if Biden essentially sweeps the South, how is that going to be something that the Bernie campaign can make up? Biden's margin in the South among black voters in Alabama increased dramatically relative to his margin among black voters in South Carolina, I think by something like 17%. So how is Bernie going to compete in these areas if he's getting totally destroyed among black voters who don't vote necessarily as a bloc, but Southern black voters in particular have made it clear that they are determined to vote for Biden. So when you talk about this turnout issue, turnout's up across the board. The turnout in Virginia was enormous. It exceeded 2008 levels. Yeah, there's been population growth since then, but 2008 was a landmark year, so the turnout's gone up massively. But Biden still won an outright majority in Virginia. So turnout is not your savior if you're a Bernie supporter, because the people turning out are the people who have been fed this daily diet of Trump-related alarmism that has engendered in them a certain response is not conducive to getting on board with a Bernie-style program. So that's the broad thrust of my takeaway. Some of the results yesterday were just unbelievable. I mean, I can believe them, I guess, but it still was shocking to see Biden win Maine. If you had asked me a week ago, what are the chances that Biden wins Maine? I would have said 2%, something like that. I would have thought it was just unthinkable that Biden could even dream of competing in Maine. So if he could win Maine, if he could win Massachusetts, if he could win Minnesota, that shows you that the establishment kind of coordination really, really did work. That's why you had Pete endorse, Amy endorse, Beto endorse. Now Bloomberg has dropped out and he's endorsing. He can spend billions to boost Biden and attack Bernie if he wants. So, you know, did Bernie do okay in some places? Yeah, he won Colorado where there was a lot of early voting. He won California, but where there was a lot of early voting, although his margin in California doesn't seem to be anywhere near as big as people thought. As of the latest data I'm looking at, give me 1 second. My computer's not loading, but the last I checked, the margin in California was I think around 9 points, which is not going to be enough to overcome Biden's strength elsewhere in the country, especially when you have states that have yet to vote, like Florida and Georgia, where Biden is almost guaranteed to do extremely well, especially Florida. And especially with Bloomberg dropping out, where Bloomberg had actually led some polls in Florida. So even in Vermont, Biden won more than 20% of the vote, which means that he got something like 5 delegates out of Vermont? Really? Hillary Clinton got 0 delegates in 2016 against Bernie. I know there are more candidates this time, but that's not the sole explanatory variable here. There are other factors, and it'll take a long time to go through all of them. And I don't have a concise, all-encompassing answer because it's multitudinous and multivariate. But yeah, it's ridiculous to say that Bernie has expanded his reach this year. He's cratered among rural white voters. That was already evident in Iowa and New Hampshire, even though he won the popular vote in both states. The reason that why he was so competitive over a sustained period of time in 2016, or at least one of the big reasons, was because of his relatively surprising strength among rural voters who lean moderate conservative. That's why Bernie in 2016 wasn't your typical liberal insurgent candidate. His coalition was much broader than that. That's why it was a unique and formidable candidacy. But there's some stuff going on right now which actually suggests that he's not carrying over that coalition to the same extent. And don't tell me that, oh, he's doing well with Latinx voters. Latinx? Nobody uses that term. Even the Bernie campaign doesn't use the word Latinx. Because working class Latino voters have no recognition of what that even means. So when I see white liberals praising Bernie for making, you know, impressive strides with Latinx voters, I want to tell them, you realize that you, meaning white liberals, are the only people that actually use that term? And you look ridiculous. As you could probably imagine, maybe my favorite result from last night was that Tulsi won a delegate in American Samoa. Round of applause for that. That was great. Actually, in the first extended interview that I did with her from around a year ago now, on YouTube and podcast, we joked that she could be the front runner in American Samoa, and it was sort of like half joking when I said that, but I thought it was plausible that in a caucus in American Samoa, where not that many people vote at all, her having been born in American Samoa could easily get her a win or at least a delegate, and it did get her a delegate. Now, according to the DNC rules, that means she's entitled to participate in the next debates, but of course, they immediately put out their spokesperson and said that they're going to change the rules and rig it, and she's not going to be allowed to participate in the debates. Shocking. But it is gratifying and satisfying to me that she did at least get one delegate somewhere, even if Mike Bloomberg hilariously won overall in American Samoa, because he got the endorsement of this tribal chief, who I guess has some political pull, and he had 7 paid staffers in American Samoa, and he, like everywhere else, flooded it with TV, digital, print, and radio advertising. So the one contest that Mike Bloomberg won outright was American Samoa, and he's now out, and he's endorsed Biden. The Mike Bloomberg campaign was just a total disgrace. As I mentioned on Twitter, somebody in a position to know firsthand told me that when Bloomberg was initially surging, or when there was speculation that he could actually win some contests on Super Tuesday, and by the way, I hate the term Super Tuesday so much, I'm just going to call it Stupid Tuesday. But when Bloomberg was running around telling potential endorsers that he could win on Stupid Tuesday, he was playing pundit, and he was saying what his path to the nomination was. He was forecasting out, just like your average TV idiot would. And what he said was going to happen was that Biden would drop out after Nevada, and that Tom Steyer would win South Carolina. And that would create a path for Mike Bloomberg to clean everybody's clock on Stupid Tuesday, which is just hilarious. But yeah, so Tulsi now has more delegates than Andrew Yang, than Kamala Harris, than Michael Bennet, than John Delaney, than Deval Patrick, than Tom Steyer. And I really enjoy that. That will never be taken away. Boom. And now that means that she's guaranteed a role at the convention of some kind. Because you just need one delegate to be a participant. So I'm almost certain that they, of course, will never allow her back on the debate stage, and they'll change the rules and rig it. But she has a legitimate grounds now to contest that, because she satisfied the criteria that they set out. But this is all the more reason why I don't want to hear any more of these questions about why she's still in the race. She's got a delegate. She can play a very constructive role. She already dismantled Russiagate propaganda on behalf of Bernie, who won't even do it for himself. I mean, does Bernie and the Bernie campaign and the Bernie media people, do they realize that after this really terrible result yesterday for him, there's probably going to be even more attacks against Bernie for doing the bidding of Russia, because they can accuse him of staying in the race solely to sow division in the Democratic Party to weaken Joe Biden and help Trump. If you have any doubts that that's going to be said, you're dreaming, because it will. So does Bernie have a convincing response to that? Does he have a rebuttal? Can he refute it in an intelligent way? Or is he going to continue to validate the false narrative, which of course is just going to be self-defeating for him? I don't know. I have no reason to believe that he's going to change his course on this issue. Tulsi needs to stay in the race purely for that reason, but there are, of course, many other reasons why her presence is extremely valuable. Yeah. So I'm going to scan through some of the super chats here. I have my computer open as I'm recording this on my phone, which actually is not a bad setup now that I think about it. Finding Neo says, how can we not believe there is massive fraud? With Bloomberg dropping, it seems clear that they all teamed up to split Bernie votes. No machine hacking. Well, I mean, I don't have any evidence of machine hacking. There's always discrepancies or issues or considerations around election infrastructure. One of the reasons why they gin up hysteria about Russian interference or foreign interference in general is to kind of cover up their own ineptitude and inability to run elections competently. I mean, did you notice that Virginia, which actually did revamp its elections infrastructure recently, to their credit, reported their results in about an hour, whereas we had to wait until the middle of the night for every place else? It's because the infrastructure is decrepit. So they frighten you about foreign interference to distract from their own inability to competently run elections, and also to distract you from the real threat of interference, which is establishment consolidation, establishment pulling of the strings. Didn't Bloomberg interfere by flooding the entire country with $600 million worth of ads so he could win some delegates in American Samoa? Fabulous Woods Witch says, thanks for covering Tulsi, free Assange. Thank you. Oren says, I rely on independent journalists like you for insightful commentary on U.S. politics. MSM in my country is useless and propagates Russiagate and similar. Yeah, we're in the same boat there. Thank you for the compliment. One thing that I find incredibly tedious at this point are all the online progressive media figures and others, emotionally begging Elizabeth Warren to drop out of the race. Maybe she'll drop out. Maybe she won't. She says she won't. She's already claiming that she's going to contest further states. But the pleading is so unbecoming. It lacks dignity. It's undignified to be saying, Elizabeth Warren, please help our progressive cause. It's just like, have you been following what she's been doing for the past 2 months? She's made it perfectly clear what her objective is. She's saying that she's going to take it to the convention and be a unity candidate on the second ballot between the so-called progressives and the moderates. Now, is that at all likely? No, but, it's not. There's not a 0% chance that could happen. Something crazy could happen with Biden. Something crazy could happen with Bernie. They're both old. So, who knows? So there is an eternal logic in what she's doing. But, were you confused when she accused Bernie of being a sexist on the debate stage in a PR stunt? Were you accused when the day before the Super Tuesday this week, she went on TV and said, oh, Bernie's going to raise taxes in the middle class, how horrible? Were you confused when she said that superdelegates should weigh in and take it from Bernie? I mean, what more do you need? She's opposing the Bernie campaign because she does not want him to be the nominee. So this begging and pleading is so. I mean, it's tedious to say the least. So I mean, enough of that crap. If you want to take her down, take her down. The Bernie campaign and Bernie himself have chosen to play nice with her. They've chosen to, overlook her cynicism, her maliciousness. She has the biggest super PAC in the race right now. And the donors are being kept secret. You think she didn't know that by using super PAC money in major media markets, she was going to eat into Bernie's margins? Of course she did. That's why she did it. This idea that, like, oh, well, Liz, please be an ally and help us, it's just, pathetic. If you want to know how to take on Warren, go look at Tulsi's tweet from yesterday, which was incredible. It was actually, she tweeted Dana Perino, the Fox News host, and the former George W. Bush lackey, who said, and she says, I'm quoting Tulsi here, "I'm not quite sure why you're telling Fox viewers that Elizabeth Warren is the last female candidate in the Dem primary. Is it because you believe a fake Indigenous woman of color is real, and the real Indigenous woman of color in this race is fake?" I mean, goddamn. Did that need to be said or what? I mean, one thing that's hilarious to me is that Donald Trump, when he mocks Elizabeth Warren for the Pocahontas stuff, is actually exhibiting more solidarity with these Native American activists who have said for like a year and a half at this point that Elizabeth Warren stole their heritage, that she lied, etc., which is, I guess, in a way racist, right? What Elizabeth Warren did. So Donald Trump is a better ally to those people than many people in the Democratic media sphere. Because, like, obviously that whole thing was a total joke on Elizabeth Warren's part. So why is it taken until now for her to be called out on it? I mean, Tulsi's willing to say what others will not say, to put it mildly. And so I am constantly impressed by her courage and conviction. And I know that sounds overly earnest, but it's just the truth. And you won't find a more cynical person about politicians than me, generally speaking. Okay, that'll do it for now. Maybe I'll have another point to make later today, or maybe not, but we'll see. And I don't have a piece to promote right now just because I haven't gotten around to it because of how late things went last night. But, there'll be something soon, so I'll talk to you all later.